Before we start this video, a large thank you to Nave, that is a really cool name, Pedro, Simon, Barry, Joseph, Alexandrius, Thomas, Owen, FPV Master, and Daniel for their support on Patreon. I hope you guys enjoy the video. And a large thank you to Mike Harden Games for their immense support to this channel. Hello guys, okay, today we're going to completely revamp our weapon system, and this will be the framework for us implementing archery. So as you can see, when I equip this weapon here, all that changes really is we get a right-hand animation that's an idle. And all these animations right here, if we wanted to do what we're doing now with this system, we have to keep adding new animations for every weapon in the game, and we're not going to want to do that. What we're going to do instead is we're going to replace the animations in these little boxes, including the locomotion animations, depending on the weapon you're holding. And we can do that with a thing called an Animator Override controller. So basically, as you can see here, we have our locomotion. We can actually change this and all the attacks and every animation to something different depending on the weapon we are holding, including the two-handed, the idles, the movement, the attacks. That will basically eradicate the need to keep dropping in multiple animations all the time in the animator and cluttering up the animator. It'll also make it so you can change movement on the fly and you don't have to call all these weird empties. It just makes the system a lot more clean. So let's start off by going to our weapon item script. And we're actually going to erase a lot of stuff. We're going to erase all these attack animations here, all the idle animations. We're going to erase a lot of stuff. It's going to make this a lot nicer and a lot cleaner, a lot easier to expand. So let's start off by just getting rid of the attack animations here. And let's get rid of the idle animations here as well. And, okay, that looks good. Let's get rid of the weapon art animation. And let's actually create a header up here called weapon type. Okay, so let's make a header. First, let's make a public animator override controller variable, rather. Let's call this weapon controller. And we can make a header. We just call this weapon animations or animation or animator replace or whatever you want to call it. It's just this is going to be where we put our animation info. So we actually want to classify our weapons too now into separate classes for future when we handle like different damage animations depending on the weapon you're using. So let's make a header and call it weapon type. And this is going to be very, very handy for doing directional damage in the future and playing different kinds of heavy damage animations or light attack damage animations depending on the weapon you're wielding. For example, a great sword, let's make a script by the way, called enums. A great sword will have a different damage animation than a light sword if the great sword has a fully charged heavy attack. So let's go into this enum script, and enums are very, very useful. If you don't know what they do, I'm sure you'll figure it out by watching this video, but I'll describe it. Let's try to make our namespace. So enums, if we make them outside of the class file, let's just make a public enum and call it weapon type. We can basically call upon these, and all they are is we open up some curly bracers here, and we make a list of, I guess we'll call it titles or labels. So we can say straight sword, faith caster, magic caster, pyro caster, great sword, shield, unarmed, you get it, like anything like that. And then what happens is, instead of doing like, if this weapon is this, then do that, and using an if statement, we can just compare it to the enum type. And this looks a lot neater in the inspector because you get a cool drop-down menu. So instead of having like 50 bools, you just get one clean variable called weapon type. We can call that weapon type. And then when you actually make the weapon as a scriptable object, you can pick from the drop-down what type you want. So you can see where that will look a lot nicer and neater in the inspector. And it's going to set up another segue to a future topic that I'm not going to talk about right now. But now that we got that done, let's go over to the player combat manager. And you can see here how right here we're referencing the attacks on the weapon we're not doing anymore. Well, since we're going to replace the animations here in the animator window, these animator names will always be the same. And by that I mean like it's always going to be, well, not one-hand sword attack. We're just going to name that one-hand light attack 1. Let's rename all these to all the attack options. So we'll have one-hand light attack 1, and then one-hand light attack 2, and then one-hand heavy attack 1, one-hand heavy attack 2, then two-hand light attack 1, and then two-hand light attack 2, and two-hand heavy attack 1, and two-hand heavy attack 2. Now back to what I was saying, these little animation blocks, they never actually change. Their names are always constant, okay, unless you change them yourself like I'm doing right now. So, but the animations inside that get put into these on the overrider controller, they can be called whatever the hell you want them to be called. But if we keep these names out here consistent, then we can basically reference just this animation, and depending on the weapon you're holding, for example, a straight sword will have a different one-handed light attack than a mace or a greatsword. But it is still called a one-handed light attack. the Animator Override controller will see to it that the Great Sword's one-handed light attack is different than the Straight Sword's one-handed light attack. But they will keep the same little casing, this little animator component here, and we can reference that in our script. And that makes it so we don't need to reference anything from our weapon. We don't need to store information about our animations on our weapon anymore. And it's just so much nicer and cleaner. One thing to note, though, is make sure your speed is set to 1 on all these, because if you want to tweak the speed now, you have to tweak the speed of the individual animation instead of this little animation box. But again, this will make it a lot neater and so much nicer switching back and forth between your weapons. So I'm just going to check foot IK on all these, and you're going to see we're going to get some errors. So let's actually go back into the script now and clean this up. Okay, the first thing you want to do is make a header. And I'm just going to call this weapon animations or attack animations, whatever you want to call it. And quite put simply, we're just going to make a string. This can be a private string. It doesn't need to be public unless you want to make it public, because if you want to edit it in the inspector, I don't know. But I'm going to call it string, and we're just going to name it the exact same thing we've named these down here. So one hand, I'm actually going to keep it lowercase just to match naming conventions for now. One hand underscore light underscore attack underscore 1 is going to equal to, and then put the string value of your animator little event thing. So make sure the string value that I have put there now is equivalent to what it will be in the animator window, okay? And then when we erase weapon, you can see there we go, it just works. We have to do it for the rest of these now too. So before I go off and start erasing weapon, let's actually make the rest of these animations. So I'm going to make one hand light attack 2, one hand heavy attack 1 and 2, and then 2 hand light attack 1 and 2, and 2 hand heavy attack 1 and 2. Excuse me while I drink this tea. Okay, so we're basically going to be referencing the animations from this script now, the player combat manager. But like I said, these animation names are always static. No matter what weapon you're going to wield, we're going to set it up so they always work with these animation names. And again, this is a lot neater now and a lot nicer because we don't need to store so much information on our weapon, and we're basically just slapping a whole list of animations to a weapon with one variable, that variable being the Animator Override controller. So when that's done, go down here and erase weapon wherever you find it, because now we just reference it from the script. And you're probably going to find it in a few places because we did do a lot of work here. In the next couple of videos too, if you guys want, I can actually do the rolling attack, the running attack, the jumping attack, and all that if you don't know how to set it up. If that's something you want me to skip over, let me know, because the logic is straightforward. But if you want to see it, please comment below. I can get that done real quick. Now, let's just go over and make sure we have all this done. Yes, correct. Okay, that's nice. Okay, looks good. Oh, right here. So we didn't actually add the weapon art yet, so let's do that. Let's just say weapon art. Up here, string, weapon art. We're not going to touch the special attacks for a while. I will do them, but they're honestly just the same as any other attack, except for the circumstances in which you can do it. I believe in Dark Souls 3 you can only do most special attacks when you're two-handing the weapon, except for shields or certain offhand weapons. Okay, so let's call it weapon underscore art. Excellent. All right. Now, let's keep checking the script for any errors. I think we have everything now. Okay. Yeah, we're good. So, let's move forward now. We still need to make the Animator Controller and replace animations. And we need to set up a couple things with our weapons as well. So let's save that and see what else we have to do. Don't mind me just checking this over to make sure I didn't miss anything. Okay, looks good. I'm just going to minimize all this as well. But we're setting this up also because our bow, when we aim down the sights of a bow, it's going to have its own walking animations for walking and aiming specifically. So before we started archery, I needed to do this. So on the player weapon slot manager here, we can actually get rid of this animator.crossfade.left-hand idle and two-hand idle. We don't need that now. That'll be all handled with the Animator Controller Override. I think we'll need to put in an offhand idle for offhand weapons because you're going to use the main controller of the right-handed weapon, but you will still use the arm animation of the offhanded weapon. So let's make a public string offhand idle animation in our weapon item script. And this is if you want to hold multiple weapons at one time. For example, like if you're holding a straight sword and then you have a shield might have a slightly different offhand idle than your straight swords, so we want to give it its own idle for your arm and hand only. Now, back over in your player weapon slot manager, we actually need to pass over the information to our animator when we equip the weapon. Basically, what I'm trying to say is when we equip our straight sword, we got to tell the animator that we're not using a straight sword controller and we're not using an unarmed controller. So let's call upon our player animator manager up here at the top. And on awake, let's call upon that by saying player animator manager equals get component player animator manager, as again, this does sit on the same game object as the script. So what we're going to do is when we equip the weapon, we're going to declare the animator override. So right here is left, ignore all that. We don't need to do anything right there. But down here, we're going to say player animator manager, dot animator. And I believe it's runtime animator controller is equal to weapon item. And what did I call that? I think I called that, no, not weapon controller, perhaps? Yes, weapon controller. So when you equip the weapon, it will put in the controller. Okay, that looks good. Just checking over here. Okay. Now we're going to need to play the offhand animation too, right here. So we'll say player animator manager dot play target animation, and I think I called that, yeah, weapon item dot offhand idle animation. And let's set that to false because we don't want it to interact. Okay, looks good. We are good. Okay. Oh, one more thing too. Let's copy this right here and paste it down here as well, because we still need to assign the unarmed controller. So if we don't have a weapon in our right arm, we get the unarmed controller for our right arm, because the unarmed weapon will still have a controller. Okay, it looks good. Now, let's get rid of all these weapon types. Again, we don't need it. That'll be covered under our new weapon type. And that's going to cause us some errors, so let's get to fixing that now. First, though, I'm going to add a couple weapon types here under the enum. I'm going to add shield, because we have that in our game right now. And so right here, where we have handle RB action, what we can do is we can go to, I don't think I made that public, did I? No, I didn't. Okay, make sure you make weapon type public. And now over here on player combat manager, what you can do is you can go over here and you can say right-handed weapon dot weapon type equals, make sure you use it twice. We can say weapon type dot straight sword. Now, if we have a straight sword, we will go to that melee action. And then down here where we have this caster thing, I'm just going to copy that and I'm going to put right here caster. But first, let's add that to the list. I don't think we have any magic spells in the game, just pyromancy and miracle, but I'll say spellcaster to keep the naming conventions consistent, and I'll add that in right now. So weapon type dot spellcaster. Let's just move this down a line so it looks more neat and we can read it easier. And again, we're going to paste the same thing here, but we're going to say weapon type dot faithcaster, and that just looks a lot nicer too, way more appealing to the eyes. And then down here, we're going to say weapon type dot pyromancy caster. Why did I capitalize that M? What is wrong with me? Let's fix that. Okay, that's good. Why am I still getting an error over here? Oh, I did not call the right weapon. I erased too much. Make sure you're still calling it from the right weapon. So I'm just going to paste that. Looks good. And that is so much nicer. And again, no more multiple bulls, just one single variable that you assign for every weapon. Much nicer. Okay, down here under the handle LT action, as we ramp up difficulty in our project, or I mean not difficulty, but as you ramp up features, you have to try to simplify everything that you can. At first, if statements and bull statements are more useful, but as time goes on, we're going to replace a lot of these things. But we're not going to do it until we ramp up, because you want to start off as simple as possible. And right now, this is the simplest approach because it keeps everything organized. So I'm going to put that as shield and that as straight sword. And then down here, let's look for more of these options. Right here, where we have if faithcaster or is pyromancy caster, we're going to say the same thing. Weapon dot weapon type equals weapon type dot faithcaster. And then copy the same thing down here, but make it pyrocaster. Now, we can use these enums in the future too, and we're going to. I haven't done my solo project. We're going to use them for attack types too, like light attacks, heavy attacks, running attacks. And from that attack type, we can get damage animation data. That's going to come in a future video, but we're going to slowly make these things a lot more modular, and we're going to integrate them to be a lot more dynamic and user-friendly too. All right, I'm going to erase these regions. I don't like them. I started off liking them a long time ago, and now I'm not a fan. I don't think they look very nice. I'm just going to reorganize a couple of these functions here and place them over other ones. Don't mind me. Just trying to make it as pleasing on the eyes as I can. Okay, that looks good. All right, put some spaces here, and I'm going to move this block action. Actually, it doesn't belong down there. Let's put that up here. Okay. So, We have our weapon types and we have our animator controller. So now what is next for us? What is left for us to do rather? Let's save that. Let's actually go now to our weapons. You can see this cool drop-down menu. We have weapon type. Let's assign them all a weapon type, or the ones that we use anyway. Keep in mind that if you do add a weapon type to the enum, I believe it might mess with some of them. Because for example, if your third enum is straight sword, and then you add one right where the straight sword was, and you push the straight sword down, and you add like dagger, I think anything that was straight sword might change to dagger. I'm not 100% sure, so bear that in mind. If you're going to make weapon type enums, you might want to just put all the weapons that you're ever going to have in your game right now. Otherwise, you might have to come back and change a lot of weapons in the future. Okay, so now we can go over here. We need to make the unarmed one. So I just added the unarmed. What we're going to do is we're going to add this over here. We're going to say equals straight sword or weapon type dot unarmed. So if you're holding a straight sword or you're unarmed, you're going to proceed to an RB melee action. And you can see where this is gonna lead to. If you can put that mace, straight sword, great sword, whatever it is. If it's a weapon that can swing a melee attack, you're gonna proceed to an RB melee action. And then right here on the LT action, we're just gonna put unarmed, because if you're unarmed in Dark Souls, I believe you can parry with your offhand. And that looks good. Okay, that's fine. Okay. Now, yeah, it did mess with my weapon types, so I'm just gonna go correct these real quick. So now we have to make the weapon overrider controller, and I have a lot of animations because a lovely gentleman named Robert actually stumbled upon me and agreed to help me animate Nephilim. And I'm going to use some of Nephilim's animations in this video to showcase how we're going to make animator controller overrides. So I'm going to start off by creating, and going to go down to you see Animator Override Controller right down here. And I'm going to call this Straight Sword Controller. So I'm going to make two in this video. I'm going to make one last. I'm going to make the Unarmed Controller and the Straight Sword Controller. And I'm going to show you that it will both... We're going to actually make sure this overrides the humanoid controller, though. But both of these controllers will give us different locomotion animations and attack animations. So I'm going to make sure I set that to humanoid. And what you want to do is, you see these attacks in here. This says one-handed light attack 1, but you can see it's called Unarmed one-handed light attack 1. You want to make sure the names on the animations, the unarmed animations, match up to the animations block names. Otherwise, when you go to the controller, it might be harder to replace them. So what I mean essentially is that on your default blank animator, your humanoid animator, make sure your one-handed light attack 01, make sure the raw animation file doesn't say something like birds. Otherwise, when you come in here to replace an animation, it's going to say birds, and you're going to be like, why can't I find one-handed light attack 01? But when you do that, just go in now and click on the straight sword controller and replace all the attack animations that you want and all your locomotion animations. So right now we have one-handed locomotion only. I'm going to add two-handed in this video. But for now, let's replace the walk and run, forward, backward, forward, left, right, you know, all these animations right here. And I'm going to check our blend tree because I believe we're actually missing a couple of the strafing animations. Maybe it's because I didn't have them back then, but I certainly have them now. So I'm just going to drag these in here. And whatever animation I drag in here, while this animator controller is active on our character, we will basically be running the same animator controller, but we will override any animations we drag in here. Otherwise, they will stay the same. So if we don't override our roll or our backstep, they will stay the same. But if you want to add a specific roll or a specific backstep for your sword, then by all means, drag it in and replace it. Okay. That looks good. Yeah, I'm definitely missing a couple here. So let's go over to the blend tree. And I'm actually going to add a couple fields here. And now that I can see it, I am missing okay, so walking and running, they're separate. But you should always have a forward left, a forward right, a backward left, and a backward right. And that's true for both running and walking. So you need walking forward, forward left, forward right, walking backward, backward left, backward right. And then you need running forward, forward left, forward right, running backward, backward left, and backwards right. If you don't have them all, don't worry. You can get away with like forward directional movement, so like forward, back, left, and right. It just won't look as pretty. But if you do have them all, I'm going to show you how to set it up. I'm just going to drag these in here now, and I think some of the values are going to be a little bit messed up, so bear with me. Yeah, they're not going to obviously go in on their own. I was missing quite a few, though. Okay, so basically the Y value is how fast we're running. Okay, so if it's 1, we're running full speed. If it's 0.5, we're walking. And the X value is, are we going left or are we going right? -1 is left, 1 is right. It's just that simple. Not overcomplicating it at all. So if you're walking, your y is 0.5. If you're running, your y is 1. If you're going left, your y is, your x is -1. And if you're going right, your x is 1. That's just it. The only difference is if you're using an animation that walks left or walks right or runs left or runs right, you don't have any movement on the y because you're purely going right. So if you're walking left or walking right, it will be minus 0.5 or 0.5. I messed it up here in the clip. I think I corrected, but it's because there's no movement on your y at all when you're walking perfectly right or you're walking perfectly left, because your y movement is up and down and your x movement is left and right. I hope that makes sense. I know these things look kind of intimidating to some people and it's kind of hard to see what's going on. But it's very simple. Again, I'll repeat it one more time. Your X movement is your left motion and your right motion. Your left being -1, your right being 1. Your Y movement, your position Y, is your up or down. So forward or backward, 1 or -1. And you can basically make a box up there on that little picture above that just encompasses every direction. And that's how you'll know you got it right. Now, I'm going to go over here now and add these new animations to the straight sword controller. The run, forward, backwards, left and right, all that good stuff. And you can put in a sprint too if you have it. And then after that, I'm going to make us a variant of this blend tree, but with two-handed animations. And we're going to switch to them when our character holds a weapon with two hands. So that looks fine for me now. Okay, I think we're good. Now I'm going to unlock this. Let's go to our sword, drag in the Animator Controller, make sure you do that. And let's copy this locomotion and paste it, okay? I'm going to call it two-handed locomotion, or just TH, or locomotion TH. TH locomotion, doesn't really matter. Now we got to know when we're two-handing on our animator. I don't think we have a parameter. I thought we did, but I'm wrong. So let's make a transition, and let's add a condition. And you're going to see me looking for it right now, and I realize it's not there. So we're going to add a parameter to the animator, and we're going to call the parameter is two-handing, okay? And it's very simple. We're going to say if two-handing is true, change to the two-handed locomotion. Otherwise, if it's not, change back. And make sure you ontick has exit time. I repeat, ontick has exit time, unless you want a slight delay. It doesn't feel very good. If you want to play an animation at the same time, you can just play an animation when the two-hand flag is true. Play like grabbing sword with two hands, just a short little clip if you want. So I'm going to make a public bool here on the character manager called is two-handing weapon. And then on the player manager, here on the update function, we're going to want to say animator.setBool is two-handing weapon with our is two-handing weapon. And now we got to make sure that we're switching that is two-handing weapon bool on the character manager to true whenever we switch to two-handed in our input manager. I believe it's called two-handed flag. I'm going to check that momentarily. So let's save that. Yeah, on the input handler here, if two-hand flag, we're going to say player manager.is two-handing weapon is equal to true. And if you want to, you can put an animation here that just shows the player grabbing the sword with his other hand or the weapon. I don't have one of those in this project, so I'm not going to bother. And make sure you say player manager.is two-handing weapon is false right here and save it. Okay, that looks good. Now, let's actually get to making the two-handed selection. So defaultly, when your player is not holding a weapon, there is no two-hand, obviously. You can't two-hand your own fists. That would be kind of silly. But we can go in here. You can see all these animations are called walk forward, walk backward. You're going to get them confused when you try to edit it in the Animator Override. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to duplicate every single one of these animations, and I'm going to put two-handed in front of it, just TH. I'm not going to make you sit through that, so I will be right back after I do that. But just, there we go. So now that I have that, I can drag these in here. And again, these aren't actually two-hand animations because you can't actually two-hand your fists. So I'm going to put these in here as placeholders. So when we actually try to replace them on the Animator Override controller, it's easy. And now I have that done. So now if we go to our Animator Override controller, we're going to have all these new two-handed animations. So let's go to Straight Sword again. There's a lot of stuff in this project called Straight Sword. Straight Sword controller, rather. Okay, good. And now you'll see it says two-hand idle, two-hand backward, two-hand forward, etc., etc. So I'll go to my straight sword, locomotion, and I'll drag in all these two-handed animations. Now, some of you, like myself, may have animations where your two-handed isn't exactly able to hold the sword precisely. I'm going to uncheck it has exit time here. Let's also erase this animator crossfade both arms empty. Don't need that. Let's erase that left arm empty, right arm empty. Don't need that. Okay, I think we're going to have to add something for our left hand. Make sure you change this left arm idle to left underscore arm idle 01. As you can see here, I have that named here. If you don't do that, you're going to break your animations. And go to your weapon and make sure that you replace it in here, because it might appear as without the underscores if you just edit it in the script and it's already in the weapon. Okay, now that's good. Make sure you put a comma here and say true. This is enabling our rotation when we play our offhand weapon animation. Otherwise, you won't be able to rotate. I forgot there was a hidden parameter in the play animation for is the player allowed to rotate. So here it is. Can rotate is automatically equal to false. Make sure you say true. Otherwise, you'll lock your rotation. Okay, that looks good. And I think we're good here. Let's paste this in here too for the offhand animation. And that looks fine. Left hand empty. Let's copy that. And we gotta replace this here with left hand empty. So for two-handing your weapon, make sure you're playing the left arm empty animation. So you stop playing the left arm idle animation. Now if I go into the game here, and you can see I have different movement now with my sword. And then if I run around, I have different strafing animations and sprinting animations. And if I two-hand, I have a two-armed locomotion set, which is also completely different. So that looks really good. And my attacks all still work. And now if I end the game over here, let's create an Animator Override. I'm going to call this Unarmed. I'm going to drag that into the Unarmed controller. I'm not going to edit anything on this animator because it just has normal animations. So if I go here, you will see that I have different strafing animations and different running animations and different attacking animations. One thing to note, if you do this, make sure you replace the left arm idle animation for the unarmed weapon to empty. Because if not, as you can see on my player, his left arm is still stuck out like he's holding something. So now if I go back in the game here, you can see all my attacks work as normal. And I have the new animations and locomotion to suit them. So now if you make a new weapon and you want to give it its own animation types, that will work. And as I was saying just before, if you're like me and you have a two-handed sword and your animations don't exactly line up with the handle, don't worry, because in the next video I'm going to show you how to do hand IK for holding your weapons in your idle stance, and I'm going to give you the ability to turn it on or off when you're attacking. That way the IK doesn't mess up the attack animations. If you like the video, please drop a like, don't forget, and leave a comment. It does generally help my series get around. And also subscribe. I never say that, but some of you are on episode 80 and you're not subbed. What the hell? And if you're feeling like a super champion, check out my Patreon below. All support is appreciated. Oh, and we did launch a website, so if you're looking for the script files for these episodes, it's much easier to grab them from my website than on Patreon. Okay, guys, I will see you in the next one.